I'm Rochelle Tong, and I'm here as I'm a program support person with Alberta Mentoring Partnership, and we're really excited to have the folks here who are taking away this session. But I just have a couple short announcements before I introduce them and they take it away. So for those of you who've registered for this webinar, I just want you to be aware that this is going to be a series of 8 webinars, and there's 3 that you can register for right now. I'll drop the links in the chat to the page that you can register for those at. And also coming up next week, we have a conference happening. It's called the Mentoring Partnership Summit, and it's geared towards supporting adolescent mental health through strengthening webs of support. You'll get to see Jason talk again if you attend that summit, and myself as well. And it's going to be on October 20th from 8:45 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. And there's a couple different breakout sessions. The keynote speaker is Derek Peterson. If you haven't heard of him, he does some amazing work on webs of support and strengthening our communities. So we're really excited to have that coming up. So check it out. Again, I'll put the link to that in the chat in a moment. So those are the 2 big upcoming exciting things happening. So we have with us today Jason and Kirsty and Janae, who come to us from the Evaluation Capacity Network, which is situated within the Community University Partnership at the University of Alberta. So the acronyms we throw around for those are CUP for the Community University Partnership and ECN for the Evaluation Capacity Network. So forgive us if we throw in those acronyms without telling you what they are. Jason is a Research and Evaluation Associate in CUP and a member of the University of Alberta Speakers Bureau. He also provides evaluation and consulting services for many diverse groups, both on and off campuses, and over the past decade has facilitated numerous focus groups and evaluations. In addition to his consulting work, Jason also teaches courses on psychology, research methods, and statistics, all riveting stuff, and has a background in cognitive development and extensive experience doing research related to the effective use of technology in education and the impact of media use on child development and student engagement. Thanks so much for being here, Jason. And Kirsty is a research intern with the Evaluation Capacity Network. She's a doctoral student in school and clinical child psychology. Her areas of interest include Indigenous parenting, child social emotional learning and development, and the provision of evidence-based, strength-based, family, child-centered, and culturally appropriate early intervention services. So since I didn't have a written up thing about Janae, Kirsty is going to introduce her in a moment, but we're so glad to have the folks that are here with us. And if you really enjoy this webinar, it is being recorded, so you can always send the link to friends and coworkers and whoever else you think would find this interesting. So take it away, folks.
Great, thanks so much, Janae. Or sorry, Janae. Rochelle, pardon me. We'll introduce Janae in just a moment. But thank you to everybody that did show up for this webinar. We're quite excited to start this series and talk a little bit about something that we're all really passionate about, which is evaluation. Which sounds kind of weird to be passionate about evaluation, but hopefully over the course of today and through the course of these webinars, we will be able to, if not convince you that evaluation can be exciting, at least take some of the hopefully the negative perceptions away from this. The way that we're going to do this is, as Rochelle said, we're going to record this. So we'll be posting up the recording of this at a later date. We will have some time for questions and answers at the end of this. In terms of your questions, you will have the opportunity as well as we go throughout to post your questions in the chat. And we'll be sure to kind of keep and monitor that as we go along. If we do run out of time and there isn't time for your question, Kirsty will tell us later on in the session, or tell you how you can get in touch with us and get your questions answered. Without further ado, we'll get started. So as Rochelle said, this webinar series is brought to you through the partnership of the ECN, which is Evaluation Capacity Network, which Kirsty and Janae and I are all part of, and AMP, which Rochelle is a part of. We're working together to hopefully provide opportunities for people who are working in mentorship communities to gain more experience with evaluation, understanding with evaluation. And the primary goal of this really is to not only help people understand what evaluation is, but help people to actually use it in their daily work and in their daily lives. So our group is made up of me and Kirsty, as we said. So we've already been introduced, but I'm going to let Kirsty take the reins here and introduce Janae.
Definitely. So Janae is an undergraduate student in psychology, and she is joining us as a research intern and in the ECN. So you'll be seeing her through these webinars and some of our other initiatives that we're going to be starting up here, which we'll share with you at the end.
All right. So for those that are kind of coming to us in terms of this particular series, one of the things that we want to look at here is trying to understand, again, what evaluation is and how we can best use evaluation. So last year, what we did is in partnership with Alberta Mentorship Partnership, we hosted a couple of workshops and 6-month learning opportunity that we called e-evaluation. And a colleague of mine, Rebecca, and I, together with Kirsty, worked with a number of different mentorship organizations through the process of creating their own evaluations and actually conducting some of those evaluations. We had a number of meetings, and Kirsty was really helpful in providing sort of face-to-face mentorship opportunities for those mentorship organizations where they could come and they could get their questions answered. I feel like it worked quite well. I think we had great opportunities for learning, and the organizations that took part, I learned a lot from them, and I think we all were able to learn a lot together. But one of the things that we came to the realization of as we were going through this particular process was the level of knowledge that was needed in order to participate in our e-eval series probably precluded some individuals and organizations from participating, either due to the fact that they didn't feel like they had as much experience as they needed to participate, or they just heard the word evaluation and had like no interest in actually being involved in anything that was related to evaluation. So what we wanted to do was actually take a step back and do what we call the pre-evaluation series, where we can focus on really just some of the basics of what evaluation is, what evaluation isn't, and to kind of give that background, hopefully that will allow people to feel comfortable in talking about evaluation primarily, but also then in looking at opportunities. We always call them like low-hanging fruit, but those opportunities that exist within any organization to practice evaluative thinking and to engage in evaluative kinds of tasks. And so that's our primary goal for this particular series. And hopefully that's what we'll be able to achieve. I'm going to turn it to Kirsty, who's going to, are you going to do a poll, Kirsty?
Yeah, so we're just going to get a little bit of perspective on how you guys feel about evaluation and your experience with it. And give me 1 second here. There we go. Yeah, so we just wanted to get your perspective on, have you ever done evaluation? Are you currently using evaluation? And do you feel like you have the knowledge, skills, and resources to do evaluation. And so we've got a couple different options there. It's just going to stop sharing so I can see the poll. For some reason, it won't let me do both, but there we go. Okay. So it looks like most of you have done evaluation and you're currently using it, and you feel like you have some knowledge, skills, and resources. So I'm hoping that means that you're here because you want to increase that knowledge, skills, and resources. But even if you answered no and you feel like you have less knowledge, skills, and resources than you would like to do evaluation, we're hoping that by the end of this particular webinar, you'll recognize some of what you already do as evaluation, and as well by the end of the series, see how you can use your existing resources and your newfound knowledge and skills and incorporate evaluation into your program in a way that's meaningful and realistic for you. So thank you for giving us that feedback.
Excellent. Thanks, Kirsty. So one of the things that I mentioned before was, or at least one of the challenges I feel when I work with individuals related to evaluation, is the whole word evaluation often brings negative kinds of feelings to people when they think about evaluation. So what I'd like to try is, if you can just take a moment and type the words that come to your mind when you think of evaluation, positive or negative, just to get a sense of what people's perceptions are of evaluation. So go ahead and just throw some words in the chat that come to your mind when you think about evaluation. Complicated, it's a great word. Feedback, growth, those are good positive words. Surveys, yeah, that definitely often is part of it. Any other words that come to mind when people think about evaluation? If the program worked, definitely. Constructive criticism. These are all great and very positive, which is really good, because maybe that's why you're here, is we've got a bit of a biased sample in this case that you chose to come to a workshop on evaluation. So all of those, I think, are fantastic words that describe evaluation. One of the challenges facilitators, perfect. One of the issues that I have as an evaluator, sometimes I'll come into organizations and work with an individual who is very much excited about evaluation, which is great, but then trying to get the rest of the organization to take part in the evaluation can be a challenge. And so not everybody has that same kind of positive feeling about evaluation. And I think for a lot of us, it's natural that maybe we have some negative connotations with this. If we think about different situations that we are and continue to be evaluated in, starting back in grade 1 in kindergarten, every time we got a test or we had to do some kind of exam was a situation where we're being evaluated. And those, for a lot of us, are very high stakes evaluations. It could be also like you meet with your boss and you have to do an evaluation of your job performance, which again is a high stakes kind of evaluation. So when people think about evaluation, it tends to, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people have this kind of notion in mind of this high stakes, critical kind of process that we take part in. And pardon me, I think that, that is part of evaluation, but I think where, again, at least I can find the challenge is helping people kind of overcome those negative connotations and focus on some of the stuff that you guys have brought up in the chat box, that there's actually opportunities with evaluation to focus on growth and improvement, and to make programs better. And so when I see things like constructive criticism and wondering whether the program worked, or trying to address challenges, those are kinds of things that I think are the really positive opportunities that come along with evaluation. So what is evaluation? So this will get into our definition. If we look at a sort of textbook definition of evaluation, here's kind of a common textbook definition of evaluation. It's an organized approach to collecting information about activities, impacts, and effectiveness that helps a program improve, or helps to improve a program, and describe its accomplishments, which is a whole big mouthful. And so it can be sometimes challenging to unpack that. But if we look at kind of the roots of what this is, it's something that helps us improve, as I said, right? It's something that we can use to look at what's going right. We can look at different aspects of a particular program and see whether or not we can improve, or are there things that need to be changed, or are there things that we just don't want to change, that we want to continue and keep the same. And so again, one of the key focuses, especially on the types of evaluation that we typically engage in, is that word improve. That most of the evaluations that I'm involved in, the primary goal, and it may be stated in different ways, but the primary goal is to improve a program. And we can do that in different ways, but that's kind of the primary role of this. So if we kind of break it down a little bit more and look at sort of more common vernacular kinds of ways that we can describe evaluation. It's a way that we can, sorry, Chris, I'll get you just to advance the slide there. It's a way that you can gather information about your program and you can make it better. And so when we talk about gathering information, again, some of the common misperceptions that come along with evaluation is, and again, this does happen, is that there are sometimes outside organizations that are requiring evaluation and they require specific information to be gathered. But that doesn't have to be the only type of evaluation. And so the type of evaluation that we're going to focus on is gathering data or information in a way that's realistic for you. For a lot of organizations, they don't have a dedicated evaluation person. This is somebody who's got a job, and this is one more task that's done on the side of their desk. And so it may not be feasible to do like a large scale evaluation with multiple surveys and focus groups, interviews, and other types of things. It may be looking at what it is that you're already doing, and can you modify a process in a way that will allow you to gather relevant information to help you better make decisions, or make or to understand what's going on. And so really, when we're talking about gathering information, it's not just kind of that formal process of creating a brand new survey and going through a whole rigorous process. A lot of it could be simply modifying what you're already doing. Again, in terms of the information you collect, recognizing, as I said before, sometimes there are requirements from outside and other processes that require you to gather specific types of information. For a really useful program evaluation, you need to gather information that's relevant and important to you as an organization. And so part of the process, and this is where I think when we're talking about evaluation, the whole systemic part of the definition of evaluation is important, because what we're doing is we're trying to just make this a systemic process that we engage in, like, or a habit, right? Where we try to look at information that we can use to help make our programs better, and we just gather that on an ongoing basis, right? Whether, again, it doesn't have to be like complex information. It could be very, very simple information, but the key thing here is that it's relevant and important for your organization or your program and your goals. We're going to describe which, in this particular case, we're going to focus on the process or outcomes that are important for you and for the people you are working with. So if we look, for example, at mentoring organizations, probably a lot of the information we're going to collect will have to do with the mentoring process, right? And how is that mentoring process working, right? Or it could be if we have some specific thing that we're looking at. For example, with the COVID crisis, a lot of mentoring organizations had to shift to some form of virtual mentoring or online mentoring. So we could look at, like, how does that work, right? Is that working? Does it work as well as face-to-face mentoring? Are there things where, even presumably, hopefully one day this COVID thing will be gone and we can go back to regular life? Are there things that we never, ever want to do in a virtual environment again? Or could there be things that we continue to do because they actually work better in a virtual environment, right? And that's, again, those questions that we can ask with an evaluation, try to find out that information so that we can make informed decisions. And again, the focus here is on improvement and trying to make things better. I believe, and my wife kind of says that I'm a bit of a Pollyanna, kind of trying to look through the world with rose-colored glasses, but I really believe that most of us want to work efficiently and want to do the very best to help as many people as possible. And so I think the primary focus for me should always be with evaluation, should be on trying to improve some aspect of what we're doing, or ensure that what we're doing is as effective as it can be. And I also am a firm believer that there's always room for improvement. No matter how effective we think we are, there's always things that we can do better or practice more or try that. But we'll never know unless we, again, get into the habit, pardon me, a habit of asking those evaluative kinds of questions. Sorry, my notes are off to my left. So if you see me keep looking to the left, I'm just sort of trying to keep track with my notes here. So what could be considered evaluation? I had a colleague, one of my mentors in evaluation, that when he would talk about like what is evaluation, he would say most people's first experience with evaluation is like Christmas, right? Where Santa's got his naughty list, right? And really, when you think about it, that is a form of evaluation, right? Did you make the naughty list? Are you on the good list? So when we think about evaluation, it could be something as simple as something like that, right? Do you ask mentors or mentees or staff for feedback on anything, right? If you do, then you're doing some form of evaluation. Do you use different kinds of statistics? And this doesn't have to be complex, kind of like you got to incorporate like a multiple regression or analysis of variance or things like that. This could be descriptive statistics. Are you looking at the averages? Are you looking at median responses? Are you looking at any kind of data patterns? Then you're doing an evaluation. Like, do you gather information to share with potential funders? Right? Are you applying for grants and you're having to put stuff together to talk about how effective your program has been, or where there's lack of funding that you need to fill in to make things better? All of those things are examples of places where people do evaluation. So once again, if you have a second, if I could get you just to, in the chat, throw in, if you have some top of the mind examples of different ways in which you are evaluating or have evaluated in the past. Again, these don't have to be complex. These could be just simple processes that you have in place to collect information. Okay, thanks, Amy. 1 year match, 3 months, 6 months, end of match survey for mentee. Perfect. That's a perfect example of an evaluation. Yeah, end of match for the mentor. And I'm assuming these would just be some sort of feedback surveys that you probably just get. Yeah, surveys, group interviews. Perfect. Yeah. Again, these are all, more on the formal side of evaluation, right? But it could be even as simple as, and maybe you haven't even thought of this, like staff meetings where you collect information or you ask for feedback in staff meetings. And that's what I've seen in some cases of very, very simple evaluations where we dedicate 10 minutes at the end of every staff meeting where we just talk about how things are going. And then we do something, hopefully, with that information. Monthly mentor connection meetings, absolutely. Yeah, those are all wonderful examples of places where, even if we don't or don't always think of it as evaluation, fits within this, I think, to me, at least, broader sense of what evaluation is and what evaluation can be. So now that we kind of have this sense of what evaluation is, the question becomes, why? Why would we want to do evaluation? And I'm hoping it's, obviously, we three are very biased because we work in evaluation. But why evaluate the mentoring sector in Alberta? If we think about just in the past couple of years and how much our lives have shifted with the pandemic, like I mentioned, for example, a lot of mentoring organizations, and I don't know whether those who are in the webinar today have experienced this, but there was, for a lot of organizations, a shift to having to do things differently, whether that was virtual mentoring or just having to shift practice. We needed to shift things. And when we shift things like that, it provides opportunities, but also, I think, situations where we almost need evaluation to see whether or not we're still able to deliver the same level of service, or are we still meeting the goals that we set? Are we still being able to deliver what we said we were going to deliver? So there's probably lots of questions that have come up. Just, I mean, just as one example, as a shift from what we normally did to this new kind of reality that we're in right now. But I think there's always ongoing situations here. We're working with mentors and mentees, and we have, in the examples that were provided, opportunities that some people have taken to gather information for both those mentors and mentees to ensure that that process is working. I mean, one of the things that we often talk about when we're talking about evaluation is focusing on stakeholders and looking at the stakeholders that are involved in our evaluations. And really, for a lot of evaluations, this is the place where we start, is really kind of to sit down and think about all of the people who may have, and this is where the term stakeholder comes from, a stake in the process or the program that we are engaging in. And this could be people who are directly involved, for example, people with lived experience. So if I am working in a mentorship organization, that could be, for example, the mentees, the people who are being mentored, and it could be the mentors. I mean, those would obviously be people who would be included in our stakeholder group. But if we cast our net a little bit wider, it could be also members of the organizations. It could be funding bodies. I mean, there's families of the mentees, potentially that could be a list of that. Other organizations that, you know, are working with us. It could be government. It could be partner organizations. I mean, we can even extend it out to the broader population of Alberta if we're looking at, for example, perceptions of particular groups of individuals, whatever that we might think. For example, if we're thinking that there might be an issue here that's leading to challenges, then we could look at that as a stakeholder. So why do we care about stakeholders? Again, this will help us to determine not only the groups and the individuals that we need to collect data from, but also will inform to whom we and in what form we should be reporting this data. If I'm reporting back to families, that will take a particular format, which may look very different from the reports that I have to provide to funders. Or if I want, for example, to publish this in the media, that will look even different from that. And so having an understanding of who all of the stakeholders are, whether they're groups that we need to collect data from, whether they're groups that we need to report data to, or simply whether they're groups or individuals that we have to just keep in mind as we're doing this evaluation. It could be, for example, that we need to include them in a steering committee to help us formulate questions. And so again, there's lots of different ways in which we can include stakeholders, and why we need to think about stakeholders is kind of the first step in our process. Now, in terms of evaluation, we've talked a lot about the definition of evaluation. I kind of like, when I'm thinking about evaluation, to think about it, evaluations falling on a spectrum. And on my screen, the arrow's a little bit washed out, but if you can see the arrows, we've got two arrows on here, like one pointing towards expert-based and one pointing towards community-based. And the way that I kind of think about it in my head is, these are two extremes on the spectrum here. We can have evaluations that are 100% completely expert-based. Okay, and this would be an evaluation where you've got a person or a group that has expertise, and we've decided that they're the ones that are going to do the evaluation. So, for example, let's say that you're going expert-based, you might hire me as an external evaluator, right? I come in, I'm not part of your organization. I come in, I would decide, and I'm not saying that I would do this, but let's say that that was the route that you went, that I would decide the questions that get asked. I get to decide the format that gets used. I conduct the evaluation. I collect the information independent from anybody else, and I provide my report and feedback. Okay, that would be the extreme of the expert-based. On the other side, we have the community-based, and this would be much more of a grounds level, grassroots kind of approach, where individuals in the organization do the evaluation themselves. Okay, so again, that would have no expert involved. That would be people, and this is, again, sometimes is done in organizations where people just get told you're going to do the evaluation. They may not have any training or any experience in evaluation, but now they got to do it, right? So that would be the other extreme. And then in the middle there, I think, are variations on all this stuff, where you can have an expert that comes in to do consulting and work with a group. Or on the other side, you could have a community group that touches base every once in a while with some expert or somebody who has more evaluation experience, stuff like that. So we tend to focus sort of more towards the right end of the scale. Most of the evaluations that we engage in tend to be community-based evaluations. We often will partner with different organizations to help conduct evaluations. So an example of, again, how I would work is if I, for example, got a call from somebody to work with them, I would come and talk to them, and with them collectively work through who their stakeholders are, what kinds of methods would work. And then I would help, again, with them work on developing questions and figure out the people to ask. I find that's a much more effective way than just coming in as an outside person and doing the evaluation, because it's really easy to ignore the findings from somebody who has no stake in this and is completely outside the organization. And when I do evaluations, what I try to do is I want to say, like, these aren't my findings. These are your findings, right? I'm helping you collect the information, but this is not really about me. This is about you. And so, I mean, you can ignore the information, but this is the information you wanted because you asked the questions that were relevant to you, and not to me. So within community-based organization, this involves the active participation in all stakeholders in all phases of the evaluation. I once worked with the government agency who wanted to do a participatory community-based evaluation. And so I came in, and I assumed that's what they actually wanted. And so I was going through the process of sort of collaboratively building all the evaluation, and actually had them come to me after about a month of this and say, we're kind of concerned because we feel like we're doing all the work here, and we're wondering why we paid you to come in and do the evaluation. I was like, well, you said you wanted to do a participatory evaluation, right? A community-based evaluation. So one of the pieces of this is it does actually require active participation of the stakeholders to do the evaluation. So it's not just the expert model. And what they were thinking was the expert, kind of more of the expert model, where I would come in and do the whole evaluation and just give them the results. The other kind of key focus of the community-based evaluation is it's the stakeholders who drive the evaluation. So one of the things I was saying before was, this is not my evaluation, right? And that's what I try to convey every time I'm working with groups on evaluation, is that really I want to put the ownership on them as an organization and say, like, I'll give you my advice, I'll give you my feedback, I'll do this, but at the end of the day, this is your evaluation. So I want to make sure that we're collecting data that's useful to you. I don't want to collect data that's just, interesting to me as a scientist, as a researcher, right? If I'm doing evaluations, it has to be useful to you. And so the type of data I collect has to be meaningful. The process I go through has to be feasible within your organization. Now, even given that, there's some flexibility in terms of how much or how little community-driven an evaluation can be. And some of you might say, well, you know what, I don't have the capacity to do all of this. And so that's okay, right? If you hire somebody to come in and help you out and do that evaluation, it's okay to offload some of that if you have the funds to hire somebody to do that. It's also okay if you want to drive the evaluation and just rely on somebody for feedback and different elements of this. So I don't want to convey that there's like a right or a wrong way to do this. There's a spectrum, there's different approaches to this. And really what's the most important is that the process and the questions and the information you collect all meet the needs that you have as an organization or a group. Right. And doing evaluation just to do evaluation, I think it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time and a waste of resources. And so that's, for me, kind of one of the most important things when I'm considering how to do an evaluation. Pardon me. So there's three main goals when we're doing community-based evaluations. First of all, we want to engage people. The stronger the relationships among stakeholders, the better equipped that they're going to be in terms of both gathering data, but also in using an evaluation. As I mentioned before, if we take the extreme example of the expert evaluator coming in from outside, like if I come in as an outsider, collect a bunch of data, give you a report saying you should change this, this, and this, and this, it's quite easy for you to say, well, he has no clue what actually is going on in our organization. How can he make these recommendations? And to put it on the side and not follow the recommendations. I think for me as an evaluator, it's much more useful when I get what I call buy-in from the stakeholders, right? If these are your questions, we're gathering the data that you want, there's no benefit for you to just to shelve that evaluation, right? This is not being used by me to judge your organization. This is being used by you, for you, to include that information. So the more that we can get people on board, engage people in the process of again, not just the process of providing information, but the process of understanding what questions should be asked, but also in using that information, I think the more useful and relevant that data is going to be. Learning together, right? Gaining new insights. The way that I look at evaluation is, and I think how evaluation should be, is not a one-time experience, right? We did an evaluation and it was good, and then we never did another evaluation again. As I mentioned, and I've kind of reiterated a few times, I think this should be a systemic process. And the more that we can kind of implement a systemic evaluative process in our organizations, the more effective we're going to be at continual improvement. And again, this doesn't have to be like, you know, high level, high stakes kinds of stuff. But if we focus on this as opportunities for learning, that's going to make it easier for us to make sure that the evaluations we do are useful and that we're all learning from them. And then finally, communicating the results. As I mentioned before, one of the benefits of going through that whole stakeholder mapping process is that this will hopefully allow us to share the information that's most useful to the groups that need it in the format that's most effective for them. And so we need to think about those types of things. And again, if I'm focusing on parents, I may not want to include like a 200-page document with the advanced statistics and whatnot. Maybe I want an infographic, right? If I'm reporting this to, I don't know, funders, maybe I want to include, you know, or focus more on, you know, the return on investment kinds of questions and things that will show them how much or how well their money has supported this particular process. Now, this is a model that some colleagues of mine have sort of come up with. They work out of Waterloo. This is Center for Community-Based Research out of Waterloo. And based on their particular approach, there's 4 phases of community-based evaluation. The first phase is laying the foundation. And this is where you really figure out the roles of all the different people that are going to be involved. So you figure out stakeholders, you identify things like a steering committee. And a steering committee could be, depending on the size of your organization, it could be like 1 or 2 individuals, right? What this really is people who can just provide that high-level oversight in the types of questions you're asking. So if I'm working, for example, with immigrant and refugee organizations, maybe I want somebody who's part of those groups to tell me about the types of questions that I should be asking. Then I move to stage 2, which is evaluation planning, where I figure out the types of evaluation questions I'm going to be asking, figure out what the best methods are, right? Do I need to make a new survey, or can I just adopt something that we're already doing, right? As Amy said, like there's, you know, maybe I've got, you know, ongoing kinds of feedback surveys that I'm already doing. Maybe I just include another question on there or modify questions that I already have. And at this stage, I might also think about an analysis plan, right? If I'm collecting, and again, this has happened in some groups where they collect tons and tons of customer feedback, or not customer feedback, participant feedback, sorry. like qualitative comments for years and years and years, and it's sat in a database and nobody's had a chance to look at it because they don't actually have the capacity to do anything with that. So part of this is thinking about what can we actually use, right? And who's going to look at the data? So, I mean, this doesn't have to be like a detailed analysis plan, but actually thinking through. So if we collect this data, what then, right? What are we going to do with it? And if we're collecting lots of focus group data, do I actually have the capacity to go through that data and do something with it? Maybe it makes more sense for me just to collect a quick feedback survey, because that's all I have the capacity to deal with at this particular point in time. Then step 3 is then gathering that information and doing the analysis. And step 4 is acting on the findings. And as I mentioned before, and then it's a cyclical process, right? I learn from my findings and then I go through the process again. I might tweak and change things, right? If that didn't work, then I might go through and change things up. And then I continue to cycle through this particular process. So, I mean, this could take on lots of different formats. One of the formats I just wanted to show you, this is the CDC evaluation framework. And their focus is on sort of, they kind of divide it up into what, so what, and now what. But you see a similar kind of rationale for them where they've gone through this whole process where they say, okay, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to describe the program. We're going to focus on the evaluation design. The so what, you know, we're going to gather credible evidence. We're going to justify the conclusions. And then the now what is, okay, so what are we going to do with it, right? And so we want to make sure that we're using that data, and then we again cycle around. And so you see the similar kind of cyclical kind of framework here in terms of this particular approach. This doesn't, again, this is just one example. This is from the CDC down in the States. So there's no like, you know, right way or wrong way to do these evaluations. This particular one is nice because it focuses on use of evaluation. It gets kind of the major steps involved. And the other thing that I like about it is it's not sort of portrayed as a linear process. It's a cyclical process, right? And it kind of gives you this sense of we're implementing this systematic kind of ongoing feedback loop where we're going to continue to gather data, refine, and continue to gather data, refine, and on and on and on and on. So one of the examples that I think might be useful in kind of looking at this is a example of this is BGC Biggs and the Alberta Mentorship, who were participants in a course that we did. So again, my colleague Rebecca Gokert and I, in the spring, we offer a 1-week intensive course on evaluation design. And so what will happen in that is we'll have community groups that provide cases, and then we bring in graduate students and undergraduate students and community learners, and they work together with the community groups to come up with an evaluation plan. And one of those groups that came was BGC Biggs and AMP, and they came and put together an evaluation plan in our, we call it UEval course. And this was an example of, and they kind of used the CDC framework to set up theirs. And so this is just one example of kind of an evaluation process where they focus on the why and how. And so we see here, for example, just to give an example of this, the intent in this case was to determine if virtual mentoring should continue beyond the restrictions, if that ever happens, and the pandemic, and to see how it can be a useful replacement for in-person mentoring in the future. So that was the intent. The purpose was to understand the effectiveness of virtual mentoring activities for children and youth in order to make decisions about continued delivery, feasibility and sustainability. And then they had a plan for use. They wanted to share with the board of directors, AMP, staffs, external stakeholders, national bodies, funders, program participants, and so forth. The what they listed in this particular case, what they did was they went through and did what we call stakeholder mapping, where they mapped out all of the potential stakeholders. And what they did was they came up with strategies to engage the different stakeholders. The second thing they did was they created something called a logic model. So for those of you that have some experience with evaluation, a logic model, what it is a visual depiction of what your program has or requires. So these would be their inputs, what your program does, which are the activities, the activities, and what it results in, right? The outcomes, the impacts, and so forth that we use in this. If you've done program planning, oftentimes you use a logic model to be able to make that happen. Looks like we're having, there we go, technical difficulties. It can be quite a useful tool for kind of organizing our thought. And the primary purpose of using a logic model, I find, and where it's most useful, is linking up the things that we're doing with what we expect to happen. And so it's kind of thinking through that process and why are we doing all these things that we're doing, right? What do I think will happen when I do this, right? So if I'm engaging in mentorship activities, I should probably believe that that will have some kind of an impact on the mentees. If so, what is that impact? Can I measure it? And then, so what they came up with the purpose evaluation, the question they wanted to answer, the data they were going to collect, and then the now what is where they planned out their how to use their evaluation and use their results. And we have lots and lots of examples of participants who've gone through either our U-Eval course or our other evaluation workshops where they create these evaluation plans. And again, each one is going to be unique and very, very specific to the organization and the needs and the goals of the organization and group that we're working with. So where do we go from here? And at this point, I'm going to shift it back to Kirsty, and she will tell you kind of what the plan is from this point forward in this webinar series.
Thanks, Jason. So we've kind of got 3 sort of initiatives going that we hope you will be able to participate in, share the word about, and benefit from ultimately. So the first one is this pre-eval webinar series, which you've kind of got a taster for today. As Rochelle mentioned, and she shared the link to sign up for the next 2. There's going to be 8 webinars in this series. They'll happen about monthly. And they'll be over your lunch hour. So hopefully we're not interrupting your workday too much. If you complete all 8, whether it be, watching this recording and then coming to the live ones, or if you're only able to watch the recordings, only able to come to the live ones, whatever it might be, we will be giving you a certificate of completion, which we hope you can use. And just to give you a heads up, the next 2, the next one coming up is on November 10th. And that's going to be about when to start planning your program evaluation. So Jason talked a lot about making it a habit, making it a system, that cyclical nature. So we'll kind of get into that and how you can set yourself up to make that a habit and make that something that's ongoing. And then the next one will be in December 15th, and that one's going to be about building an organizational culture of evaluation. So again, we kind of touched on some of the difficulties that organizations, or the hesitancies, that organizations may have around evaluation, and how can we make it less of an intimidating process and something that is more of a habit and more of a benefit, or viewed that way at the very least. And so we're hoping you'll join us for those. And as well, we've got a questionnaire that you were asked, you were able to complete. That questionnaire is helping us evaluate actually the webinar series. So it's a little bit meta. We're evaluating our webinar series about evaluation. So we're hoping that if you complete that questionnaire, it'll help us make sure that we improve the webinars as we go along, and can continue to offer supports like this in the future. The other 2 pieces that are coming up is going to be bookable individual coaching hours. So you'll be able to bring some things about evaluation questions, your evaluation plans, your evaluation results, anything you might need support with around evaluation. You'll be able to come visit us and get some support around that on a one-on-one basis. And so the booking system for that will be coming up shortly, as well as an online platform where we're going to hopefully create sort of a community of practice. So you can talk to your peers, talk to other mentoring organizations within Alberta, and see how that how they're doing evaluation, get ideas and things from them as well. And we'll also be uploading resources, sharing upcoming events, and having sort of discussion boards where you can ask questions of us, and we'll come in and sort of moderate those discussions as well. So we hope you will be able to join us for that. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can email me at kirsty@ualberta.ca as your main sort of way in to contact us. But also you can go to the evaluationcapacitynetwork.com and learn more about us and our work, as well as albertamentors.ca. And if you go to our specific eval page, you can sign up for evaluation newsletters, sign up for the webinars, and stay informed about those coaching hours and the Moodle site, the online platform. So with that, I know we've only left a few minutes for questions, but hopefully if you do have questions now, you know where to reach us. But please, if anyone's got any questions, now is the great time to ask. And yeah, I'll open it up. There's a little Q&A, or you can even just pop it in the chat.
Thank you for coming, Amy. Thank you for everybody. This was kind of our kind of intro webinar where we kind of laid the foundation. I'm hoping that you'll be able to come to the other ones where we kind of dig in a little bit more detail to some of the actual aspects of doing the evaluation. Fantastic. Thanks so much, guys.
And I've just shared the survey link in there. And if anyone in the future is watching the recording, you can also access the survey link right on the albertamentors.ca /eval.
Great. Seeing there's no questions, thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.